On a quiet Sunday afternoon in a wooded Richmond neighborhood, Lisette Johnson faced the unthinkable. Season 1, Episode 8, That Anita Live TV, edutainment to help you become emotionally whole, emotionally healed, and emotionally healthy. I interview Lisette Johnson. She calls herself a shameless survivor. It's actually the name of her blog. However, I call her a bulletproof survivor. Here's why.
Chances of being an abuser, and it increases young women's chances of being abused. It doesn't always play out like that, and one of the things that is the sort of the dividing road is how early an intervention into reprocessing into healthy relationship models, they can, the earlier the intervention, the less damage, obviously.
Now, your event happened in 2010.
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is 2016.
Right.
So, like, walk me through your recovery. What was what was the first thing that you did that you felt was normalizing life for you and your two kids?
I had a substantial physical recovery. I was not able to go home. I left the hospital after about 12 or 13 days, but I was not able to go home and take care of myself. So I stayed at some friends' houses, and every day got just a little bit stronger. I remember the first day at the hospital. I was in critical condition for like 2 days, and I was on a ventilator to help me breathe, and as I started sort of coming to and whatnot, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't talk, and they took the ventilator out, and I was sort of in and out with a lot of pain medication, but they said, well, we're going to get you up in the chair today. And the chair was probably where you're sitting, but I had tubes coming out of my chest to drain blood. I had the vent, so my throat was really sore. I was getting food through a nose tube. I had, literally there wasn't an orifice that didn't have something in it, and I felt like the Michelin Man. I remember I couldn't roll over. I could barely move, and they said, "You're going to go sit in that chair," and I said, I can't do that. And the nurse was she was no nonsense, and she said, you have to do this, because if you don't do this, you're gonna get blood clots. You need to get up. And I felt like after I got up, I felt like I had done an Ironman. I mean, I really felt, it couldn't have been 18 inches away. But I felt accomplished too. I thought, you know what? My kids need me to do this. I lived, they need me to do this. And so every really, really difficult day, emotionally and physically, I would say, I am doing this for them. So having someone else to sort of live for was very helpful. And they were relatively young too. And feeling like I needed to help them process it. Now, immediately, I was very fortunate because I was sent to a level 1 trauma center, and there was a child trauma response team that when the children were told that their dad had died and that I was in surgery, I may not live, they were told this child therapist was there and kind of helping guide the narrative, the dialogue of what that was like. But, I also felt like I've been given this huge gift. And I remember the first time I saw my kids, it was a couple of days when I was in the hospital, and the first thing I said to them was, I'm so glad to see you, and then I was like, that was the one time I said that. That was the last time I said that.
Did your kids look at you like, yeah, right?
They looked at me like, you know, I had been, you know, dropped from an alien spaceship.
Yes.
Like, what planet
Yes.
did she just come from? Because, but I needed to say it. I didn't necessarily believe it, and I certainly didn't let it, looks on their faces. I knew they weren't buying it, but I just felt like I had to address somehow. And it, you know, at first it took me, I mean, in the whole time in the hospital, it's like, you know, I drove him to this. I drove him to this. I didn't drive him to that, but that is the sort of almost the core of these types of relationships, is anything that abusive partner does, he blames it on the other person. And so the other person accepts all this blame as, you know, he did this because I do this. Because, you know, they're usually telling you, you know, I did this because, you know, you're not good at this or you're not good at that. So, you know, I really accepted this responsibility, and it took therapy. It took an intervention for somebody to sort of reframe that for me and say, well, like, you know, let's say, you know, he's an adult man. Now, who makes him do what? You know, moving through it, when I finally did get home, which was probably maybe less than a month from when the shooting happened, I think maybe a little over 3 weeks, and we got to the house, and people were like, oh, you can't go to this house. You know, that happened in the bedroom. My friends went in and repainted the bedroom, and I remember that I said, well, I like the color of my bedroom, and my sister was like, well, it needs to be repainted, and I'm like, no, it doesn't, it's fine, you know, because I hadn't seen the house.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, no, you need to repaint your bedroom. I'm like, all right, well, okay, I'll choose a color. So my friends went in, they cleaned the house, they repainted it, and you know, got it all ready for us. And when I went home the first time, I didn't go home, we just went to the house. It was the first time the children had been back in the house, and they were so elated to have their toys and their beds and their blankets and all the things that mean so much when you're, you know, feeling very unsettled. And those were their security items, and I saw, you know, they really, this is their home, and so we're going to have to make this their homework. And but there was such a feeling of peace once he was gone. It was, we don't have to worry, you know, was Daddy going to be in a good mood or a bad mood when we open the door? I don't have to keep the kids out so late they fall asleep in the car, so I can get them to the house without them having to interact with him. You know, is he going to go off on us, or is he going to tell us, you know, I missed you guys? Because that's the way it would go.
Right.
You know, one day he'd be, you know, it would be so normal, and the next day it would be, we couldn't do anything right. So removing that just felt so peaceful. And you know, so we just sort of went along for about 10 months, and then at the trauma therapist's office, I ran into a little girl. And we were just sitting next to each other. My son had gone to the bathroom, and she looked at me. She was a little bit older than him. She was about a year older than him, and she said, has your son been shot? And I thought, well, what a funny thing to say. I was like, well, no, he hasn't. And she said, well, I have. And I said, oh, okay. She said, my dad did it. And I thought, this couldn't have happened twice. But your dad shot her. And I said, you know, I'm really sorry to hear that. And she said, yeah, I still have like a bullet in my neck. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, it's amazing she's walking. And she said, he shot my mother and my brother. My brother's still in the hospital. It's been like 6 weeks. And I mean, my mind was blowing up, and I was like, this happened twice. Of course, I didn't know it happens 3 or 4 times a day. And there's very rarely somebody sitting there having a conversation about it. And here's this child, and I thought, I can't be quiet about this story. You know, what if you know, she and I, her mother and I, had known now, I mean, known then what we know now,
what red flags actually are.
Right, exactly. And so I thought, I wanna volunteer with domestic violence shelter, and they had a program to accompany a woman who had, or were in the emergency room, to just be there with them. You have people looking and prodding and taking your temperature, your blood pressure, and getting x-rays and doing all these things, but there's nobody to sit with them and help them. I mean, they're traumatized. They don't understand why this happened, and it could happen many times. You still never understand why somebody would do that. And being able to provide them resources and saying, I don't always tell my story, but just saying to people, you don't have to go to a shelter, but there are some options for you beyond that, and let's talk about that. And let's talk about making decisions. Sometimes people are like, if only I could go to a shelter, but my kids are in school and this, and so we try and figure out, like, where could you go? Could you go stay with family? Is that a long-term sustainable? And so the more I spoke with them and they shared their story, the more healing I got. Because I thought, okay, I'm doing something with this story. And if I had, and it was in the papers, it was on TV. I mean, Richmond's very small in that way. It was all over. And I have a box, I bet I got 300 or 400 cards. And I got cards from people I didn't even know. And it really showed how generous people can be. And many people said, we want to bring you food. And I didn't know. They're like, we're friends of so-and-so, and we feel terrible for you and the kids. And so I said, you know what? You may bring us food, but we need your company. Could you eat with us when you bring the food? So I met new people. I re-engaged with people that I felt were acquaintances. And the kids and I had company for 6 months, and food. But it made other people feel like they could do something when they felt so very helpless. And so it's sort of almost like paying it forward. And so I have this experience that maybe one thing someone hears makes them go, you know what? It might be dangerous right now for me to leave. Maybe I need to call that hotline. Maybe I need to talk to somebody and figure out what I want to do. And it's very, I was a very confident person when I met him. Well, 20 years later, I wasn't confident at all. And it looked like I was confident because I had this business, and I had these employees, and I had this big social network, and I was active in my kids' school, so it looked like I was confident. But inside, I was like, yeah, I am that person he tells me I am. And I wore it, and it was a heavy, heavy, heavy cloak. And I did not wish him dead. I did not wish him dead. It's been difficult for my children because they will never be able to see who he is or who he was. And I try not to filter it too much, but I mean, the end speaks for itself.
Now, when you were going through therapy, would you say that there was one particular technique over another one that helped more than others?
Well, I was blessed to have a therapist. It was a young man, and he is actually a psychiatrist because I began seeing him because I was going on medication. And he said, well, I do therapy too. And I thought, oh my gosh, you look like you just fell off the... Have you graduated high school yet? But he actually was a psychiatrist, which is a lot of schooling. And he did have a couple years. And I said, you know what, this is going to be, frankly, this is going to be convenient. So he had just gotten engaged. And, I wasn't exactly sure why I was in therapy. I just knew I was extremely depressed. I mean, and I didn't say I'm married to this abusive man. I just knew I was very depressed. And so, every once in a while he'd say, excuse me, have to take a call from his fiance, and his face would light up and his eyes would light up, and And so that was sort of just the very first light that I saw. I was like, that's the way a man should feel about a woman. He should light up, and he would say things like, okay, well, I'll be sure to take care of that, and just very loving. And I thought, oh, I don't even remember if we ever said that, but it's been so long. And so I saw that, and then he would, I remember specifically one thing. I said, well, my husband tolerates this. And he called me on it, and he said, tolerates, well, that's, you tolerate like a thorn in a splinter in your finger, or a pebble in your shoe. You don't tolerate someone you love. And so he started reframing a lot of these thoughts I had that had been sort of fed to me, and started turning them around and saying, here's an adult, where's his accountability? It was, for a while I was seeing him 2 times a week, and then, eventually it went to 1, and I was still seeing him when this happened. I think for him, it was difficult because, maybe he felt like, and we discussed it, that he should have seen signs, he should have known more. And, my husband actually had sexually assaulted me before, like 4 days before he ended up shooting me. And I was just so done with the whole thing. I was, I didn't report it to police or anything. I just thought, I gotta get out of it. I just knew this urgency. Whereas now as an advocate, I realize when those sorts of things happen, those are very big indicators that some very serious violence, and likely lethal violence, is about to happen. There is something called a lethality assessment. We don't do it formally, but we do ask, because some of the indicators, and of course I'm going through training going, oh my gosh, there's 14 things here and 13 of them applied. Children from another marriage, is there substance abuse? Have there been threats to kill you if you leave? Are there weapons or access? Because we frequently think, well, guns are in the home, or they're not. But does he have friends who have guns? That kind of thing. Is there, and they use it in the assessment, they call it choking. Well, choking is when you have food stuck in your throat. Strangulation is when someone puts their hands around your neck. But 99% of the women come in and say, he tried to choke me. Because it's hard to think when somebody's putting their hands around your neck, they're trying to close down your airway, and that is actually attempted murder. Strangulation in Virginia is now a very serious offense, but the woman's thinking, I just want this abuse to stop. I just want him to get his hands from my neck. I want him to stop treating me this way.
When he's normal, everything is fine.
Exactly, and violence, and I say violence because even though I wasn't physically assaulted over the duration, it felt violent the way he spoke and he very rarely even raised his voice. I was the one raising my voice. He would, sort of pick and prod and, just pluck at me, and then I would explode, and then I'm screaming like a crazy woman, and he's sitting in the corner like, wow, look at you, you're the abusive one, look how you're screaming.
After he chipped away at your patience,
oh my gosh,
chipped away at your self-confidence, and chipped away at your self-esteem.
Exactly, and you finally have this breaking point of, I can't take it anymore, and it's almost like entertainment. But then I thought, well, so, if he had assaulted me, and many times after an assault, when the police get there, that's exactly, the woman's has been fighting for her life, and he's sitting there going, well, officer, she scratched, look at these scratches on my arm. I mean, it's clear, and he's just as calm as a cucumber. And so I think sometimes sharing these things when somebody is, that happened to me, for them to go, you know what, I'm not the problem here. This is the problem here. And regardless of whether we understand why, it's terrible to think somebody was traumatized, like you were saying, your brothers, that they were traumatized, and they are reacting in the way that they learned how to react in trauma.
Because then I still in growing up, because my brothers are a number of years older than me, anywhere from 6 to 12 years. I have 4.
Okay.
And I've watched law enforcement in 3 different jurisdictions. You know, oh man, just cool off, take a walk around the block and then come back.
Yeah, they're cool. They know exactly what they're doing, and that's the thing. People think they snap, or they're, you know, and that these things happen in the heat of the moment. They're very cool. They're very calculated. They're so controlling. You know, it's very manipulative. They manipulate the police. They manipulate, you know, their family members. And it's really sad to think how they came to learn that. But that's still not something we can fix. We can't love it out of them.
Because when it first started happening, I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And even at 9 or 10, 6th grade, I could sit back and look and watch and think, something in this picture is not right. I mean, I'm not an adult.
Right.
I'm not a big person, but you people aren't doing this the way this is supposed to be done. Something is not right here. Because the first time I actually ran away from home, I was 5 years old.
Oh.
That was the first time. At 5, I had reached a breaking point in thinking, this is crazy. I don't know this is not the way life is supposed to go. At 5, I knew this is not the way this is supposed to go. I don't know how it's supposed to go.
I just know this isn't happening.
This is not it.
Right. Right.
See why I call her bulletproof? Domestic violence is an epidemic in our society. We are only going to eradicate it if we attack it from all sides. Lisette and I would love to get your feedback. Have you ever experienced domestic violence? Leave it in the comment section below. And consider joining my email list over at thatanitalive.com. It's where I do giveaways, contests. You may get to vote on who gets interviewed next. This was just part 2. Stay tuned for part 3.